Hello and welcome to another episode of The Scramble. I'm Jason Hawley. Today we will discuss the emergence of ISIS, otherwise known as the Islamic State of Iraq, and the assassination of two American journalists in recent weeks. Next, we will discuss the tragic shooting of Michael Brown and subsequent social unrest in Ferguson, Missouri. And finally, we will discuss Tony Hsieh's recent push to propagate Las Vegas, particularly downtown, as a place for businesses and families. First, let's meet our panel. We have returning panelist David Sarabian, a senior political science major and former intern at the State Department. New to the Scramble, we also have Skylar Young, third-year law student at the Boyd School of Law. Also new to the Scramble, we have Andrea Corral. You are a senior, I believe, in journalism and media studies with an emphasis in integrated marketing. Perfect. And we have returning with us Tiffany Pelton, a graduate student in the School of Journalism and Media Studies. A tragic and graphic video released on August the 19th depicts the beheading of journalist James Foley. Weeks later, ISIS produced a similar video of yet another American journalist beheading, Steven Sotloff. President Obama's speech on Wednesday, September 10th, outlined plans to destroy ISIS by training Syrian rebels. He also mentioned the broad coalition of partners. Now the question is, which Arab nations will join the U.S. in the destruction of ISIS? What are the possible motivations of ISIS behind their executions and their broader ideology at large? And what is the role of the United States and other developed nations with regard to ISIS? And what steps should developed nations take or not take in regard to existing actions and motivations? Who would like to start on this? It's a very heavy topic, and we're talking about this idea of our role. What is our role? Andrea, could I start with you?
Sure. I think that the United States has positioned itself as protecting and looking out for other nations. So I think that it does a good job at looking at others, but I'm not sure what the best course of action is to take with ISIS, given that, their ideologies and what the best course of action for that is. I'm not sure.
Okay, so President Obama recently stated that he would be coordinating airstrikes to, quote, destroy ISIS. David, what is your take on this? What is your take on this plan to destroy ISIS, and is it an exhaustive plan?
Well, obviously anything that the president lays out in a speech is in no way going to be exhaustive. It can't be. The Islamic State, as they're calling themselves with their many name changes, it's a very intelligent organization, and they have created for themselves a safe haven, just like the Taliban served for Al-Qaeda. And to keep in mind how extreme the Islamic State is, that they broke away from Al-Qaeda, and the current head of Al-Qaeda, Zawahiri, doesn't like them because they're too extreme. When the people that caused 9/11 think those people are too extreme, then of course we're taking it seriously, but this needs to be of the utmost importance. The other thing is that possible countries that would help us with that would be Iran, because the Salafi Islam that the Islamic State advocates, which is very, very strict, we need to be exactly traditional, and violence is supposed to happen against people that are against us. It's Sunni Islam, and of course the Iranians are Shiites. And so this is a bit of a quandary where the people that would want to help us are people that we have actively, in the form of Stuxnet, if that really was a United States measure, which it probably was, have used against Iran. The other issue is I doubt Saudi Arabia would be willing to help. And the reason why is because Wahhabism, which is the dominant religion advocated sect of Islam advocated by the Saudi royal family, is very close, if not at the very least funding the Salafi Islam that the Islamic State is advocating. We're really going to have to take this seriously. I honestly think that there should have been a lot more advisors that are going to be sent in, but this can't be like Vietnam where we fight the Iraqis' battles for them. We have to support the Iraqis, we have to help them, we have to push them out, but it ultimately has to be them. And the complexity of the Islamic State is far more than it was with the Taliban, because they have captured oil derricks and they are selling oil on the market. They are also providing social programs to the people there. So for the people there, it's going to be very difficult because they have legitimacy of being taken care of the way a government should, but isn't. And so as the Islamic State has moved in that regard.
Okay, Skylar, what is your take on this?
I think you make a good point about Al-Qaeda. They de-affiliated themselves from the Islamic State. I think that's important. They have a lot of enemies. So I think this international coalition is very imperative. I also think President Barack Obama said something about deploying 475 servicemen in there, not for combat, but for training the civilians there and giving them some help. So I think that's important.
He said these would not be combat positions, but rather intelligence and serving other roles. What is your take on the potential for success there if we're sending in about 400 servicemen and women for those roles?
Well, the Islamic State has definitely shown their power. I mean, they've taken over Iraq within months, so they're going to have to be smart about it. They're going to have to be smart. I'm not sure if 400 is enough or if it's too little, so I guess time will have to tell what's going to happen with them.
They didn't take over Iraq. The section of Iraq that they have declared as theirs, to an extent, the Sunni, I'm terribly sorry, the extent the Islamic State has taken over, that territory they were already in charge of for a few years.
But they did break the border. I mean, it was they were able to break that
border. What border? There is no
Between
border. It's
Syria.
an imaginary line on a map.
However,
And
a lot of people said they weren't able to cross it, and then they just came and took it over.
Well, as soon as the Syrian
That's a lot of
civil war
power.
started, of course they were able to cross it. It's just now that they've been able to consolidate, and the very fact is they had control before, it's just they've finally gone on this PR campaign. And it is unfortunate to say that the killing of those 2 American journalists, it is a public relations campaign. And the fact that I believe it was in the second beheading that I believe it was a man with an English accent, is that they have a global resources and that they're able to globally recruit. And there have been quite a few stories on the news about how they have been able to recruit some Americans to go over there. And so this is, I hate to say it, it's a far more complex organization than Al-Qaeda was before 9/11.
Let me ask you this, Tiffany. Is it possible for Syrian rebels to siphon funds and weapons that are given to them by the U.S. and actually have perhaps Syrian spies, if you want to put it crudely, take those resources and adopt them into the resources of ISIS? Is there a chance of that? Or if you all want to join in, what is your take on that possibility?
I think that anything is possible. And we as a country, we have a lot of international reach, and we open up our homeland to a lot of other nationalities. And so there is a lot of area for them to come in, learn our ways, and take it back.
Okay. Andrea, do you have any additional thoughts on that as well?
I think that Tiffany makes a very good point that we have a melting pot and a lot of people can identify with the United States, and it doesn't mean that those values are lost once they go back to another country.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is an interesting point as well, and I will leave it at that, being that we have to move on. So please stay with us, and we will be back in just a few moments.
Help support the Breast Cancer Patient Education Act, a bill that will help make sure women facing a mastectomy are told all their options about breast reconstruction. Visit brawdayusa.org for more information.
Thank you for staying with us, and welcome back. On August 9th, protests and civil disorder broke out in Ferguson, Missouri, after the fatal shooting of Michael Brown, an 18-year-old Ferguson resident suspected of robbing a convenience store the day he was killed. A number of media outlets have covered the story, often offering nothing more than conjecture with regard to the events that unfolded on the day Michael was killed. Have the media overstepped their ethical obligation to report only the facts as they are known, or has the incident and coverage of Michael Brown's death epitomized the emergence of unethical reporting practices where speculation is the new norm. I'd like to open this up to you. Tiffany, you're a student seeking a master's degree in journalism. What do you think about this issue, being that you're a particular specialist?
Well, I think that there's a video that surfaced within the last 48 hours, and it's of a regular witness who is observing, and they are filming it as it's happening, or right after it happened. And it seems to me that the witnesses seem to be putting the pieces of the stories together. They're providing the facts, and what the journalists are reporting seems to be speculation. And in our field, it's like you're supposed to check your facts and know what you're reporting as factual information, not as speculation. And in this case, it seems to be just assumptions and speculations going around.
Andrea, what have you seen? You're an undergraduate in journalism. What is your take on this?
I also have, that I feel that they are overstepping their bounds on just conjectures, because the media system is now 24/7, that you don't have just one live broadcast announcing the day's news. You have 3 or 4 shows happening on that day, that I feel that they're so pressured to have something new that they're just throwing an opinion. And even when you have an opinion, you have to back it up. You can't just say, oh, this happened or that happened, just throwing stuff out there. And I feel that, we have the SPJ Code of Ethics, that it doesn't have to be enforced because of free speech, but there are guidelines that we should follow to ensure that the audience is getting the right facts, as opposed to a bystander that's, doing a better job at piecing it together than a journalist.
Skylar, as a law student and aspiring journalist, what is your take on this, and how does it relate to the law even?
I think, honestly, it really is. Right now, there's been 17 journalists that have been arrested. That should not be overlooked, definitely, because they're the gatekeepers of information for the public. And I think what's important for this case are the facts as far as the law goes. If this does go to trial, the facts are going to be very important. There's a lot of witnesses with cameras. There's a lot of just like social media, Twitter feeds, and I don't know if they're going to be, if they can be admitted as evidence now. It's just very fact specific, this case, and at this point, the intent may be irrelevant. At this point, with the entire country talking about maybe not the intent of daring Officer Wilson, but the impact that it's had on our whole community and America at large, just like Trayvon Martin did. We kind of have now this ongoing conversation. So I really want to know about the facts, so they'll come out slowly. It seems like there's somehow, I don't know what it is. The police at the local, state, and national level have been able to not give us the facts. And they're able to do that, and they're able to protect police in situations like this.
So that raises another question about the state, the current state of police, and perhaps if you even go and look at the military, given that the National Guard was deployed in Ferguson to control the riots at one point. What does this say? Are we living in a contemporary police state? David, what do you think?
We're not living in a contemporary police state. What we are seeing is this militarization of police forces under the guise of it's an anti-terror thing. And it's like, you don't really not every town necessarily needs armored vehicles. I mean, of course I could understand SWAT teams, but at the very least, the response to the Ferguson shooting of Michael Brown was just a complete blow-up. The fact, it struck me as almost, were they expecting LA riots 2.0? And the response by the police, the fact that there was very little seemingly central administration or control stating, this is what we're doing. I don't recall any government leader going out and saying, we want this to end, we want this to stop. There was nothing of working with any civil rights advocates like Al Sharpton saying, we need to prevent rioting, we need this to stop. And the very fact, the way that the journalists were treated, 17 were arrested. If I recall, 2 of them were arrested inside McDonald's while they were using the Wi-Fi to upload the stories. And if I recall, at least 1 incident where a flashbang grenade was thrown at journalists. And I've myself have seen the videos of just the police treating journalists. And at the very least, the Ferguson police mishandled this to a degree that really needs to go in the history books. Because this is not how you treat your citizens. This is not what you should be doing. And I think that the way the media, to an extent, sensationalized it, due in part because of how many journalists were getting arrested, and the way the police acted, blew this far more out of proportions than it should have been. Yes, is it important we need to talk about race relations in this country and how oftentimes black youth are the victims of police shootings? Yes. But this was so blown out of proportions to what it could have been as far as how the police, as far as how the reporters were treated, that this was just a disaster.
I think a lot of it has to do, there was no check on the police. I mean, town of Ferguson, they have no citizen review board. The cop cars, there was no camera on the car or on the officer's body. So there's just no check on this police department. And I think that's probably why they brought in the National Guard to come down. But they need to do something about that. They need to change the system and the police culture in that town.
So does this go back to the issue, is this perhaps an issue of funding? And what do you think? Is there an issue of funding then when you talk about the lack of infrastructure with no cameras? And
I did read that the department head said that they had cameras, they just didn't have the money to implement them. So does that mean they're just like in the back storage? They don't have the money to put them on the cars? It was pretty vague. As far as the citizen review board, that has to be on the next ballot. I think, or I just heard the city council, maybe they introduced it today talking about that they're going to make a citizens review board.
Is there an irony with the idea that there is a lack of funding for implementing on-car cameras in Ferguson, Missouri, when we can easily spend upwards of a few $billion in the Middle East? Tiffany, what do you think?
I think so. We're always so focused on outside forces that we forget to take care of home. A lot of times the U.S., we want to help. We're a country and we have a lot to give, and so we go out and give, but sometimes we need to give to our own nation.
Okay, I gotta admit, that is a very crummy isolationist perspective. This is the city of Ferguson. Do you expect the federal government to toss money into every single city government? It's the cities that have a priority to fund their police forces, and we spend billions of dollars in Iraq. The national government's job is to worry about foreign threats. This was a domestic issue, specifically in a small town. And we can't blame the national government because they're trying to fight a war on terror because there wasn't adequate funding in one city in Missouri.
How many towns do you think has the same issue as Ferguson, though?
Oh, probably hundreds.
So I really don't think it's like, maybe
But
not
it's a
just the
city-
smallest Ferguson, but I'm sure there's tons of small towns across the country, and maybe in the South.
This is why there's a difference between, this is why we have a federal government, not a unitary government.
Yeah.
Because this is a state issue and a local issue. It's not the federal government's job to go into every single police force and say, oh, you need better funding for SWAT team, or you need more funding for cameras, because there is such a thing as autonomy, because we do not live in an autocracy or a police state.
Has anyone called negligence, though, when it comes to the lack of planning in order to implement this technology?
Not that I don't recall anybody specifically saying negligence, although it would not surprise me. Because if they did have those cameras and they didn't implement them, well, they should from now on, to at least create transparency and trust. And at the very least, today, with social media, with video cameras, with everybody having a video camera on their phone, is that there is an increasing mistrust of our police forces.
Does anyone have any final words on that? Is there a general mistrust of our police force at large? What do you think, Andrea?
I would think that there is, just because of the recent events that have been happening, that, there's always two sides to this story, and, now we have social media quickly to contest those views, so I think that there is.
Well, it definitely raises the question, and it is an interesting one at that. Our next topic, in Santa Fe, New Mexico last week, Tony Hsieh touted his success with the Las Vegas downtown redevelopment project to provide insight into how New Mexico might be able to yield similar results. What Tony has not addressed, however, is whether Las Vegas has emerged as a place in which young professionals want to live, work, and perhaps raise a family, especially considering the social indicators such as low rankings in healthcare, education, K through 12, and some of the highest suicide rates in the nation among femicide rates where men kill women. I know that Nevada is perhaps close to third world nations when it comes to its rankings, and that among others as well. What do you all think about Las Vegas, and is it a good place to live and raise a family? If not, or if it is, what direction is it at least moving in at the moment? Tiffany, what do you think?
I'm not from here, but what I've observed since I've lived here is it's a very transient city. People don't seem to want to stay long. It's you come here, you explore the terrain, and you move on to bigger and better things. So I think that he's just trying to help the overall culture of Las Vegas to make it be more of a family home city by providing them an area that they can say, hey, we have this. Because the Strip is for tourists, and the locals, they're outside, but the areas in which they provide for them aren't of quality standards. So he wanted to provide them with a playground, an adult playground, but also it provides opportunities for the children as well. I think it was a great idea.
Okay. Skylar, what do you think? I'm not sure if you're a native of Las Vegas, but you've at least been here in law school long enough to see perhaps some of these changes.
I've been here a few years. I think what Tony's doing, revitalizing downtown, investing in small businesses and startup tech companies, I think that's great for young professionals. My concern is the education system. And I think we're dead last as far as funding goes, and our minority students and ESL students not being properly served by our education system. And I think that's a big thing for our future economy. Mm-hmm. So unless we see changes in the education, I mean, it's a good place to live, but I think it starts with education, and that's really how to build a strong economy.
With a student-to-teacher ratio of about 30-1, when you're looking at K through 12 at the moment, there has been this discussion of funding and bringing in more teachers, and not only that, but also raising their compensation. Given the existing kind of libertarian mindset that exists in Southern Nevada, or some have said that it is a libertarian mindset, what is the best way to alter that ideology, if there is one? David, what do you think? You've lived here quite a few years.
Yeah, I've lived here about 6 years. And I would say that merely throwing money at a problem isn't going to help. There are significant programs here in Nevada that need to be approved on. There is barely any English as a second language training and education that goes on in our public schools. And it really needs to be fixed. As far as young professionals coming here, this is Las Vegas, working in downtown startups. I've been down there. I've been to Atomic, Gold Spike, things like that. These are not people that are looking to start a family anytime soon, especially downtown, so that's a null point. However, there are some tech startups that are down there. And the nice thing about downtown Las Vegas is that, like I said, is that it's close to California. It's certainly closer than other parts of the country. And so we can kind of pull those smarts in. We can kind of get those smart people. I know there are a few tech startups where there's some people from Stanford or MIT that are there, that are working on phone apps or whatever prospective software products. And it's good that they're revitalizing downtown.
But does that, when you have people from MIT and other perhaps Ivy League institutions that are being imported into downtown by Tony Hsieh and others?
They're not being imported by him. They are coming here because of what is available, because Tony Hsieh has helped create that environment.
Does that disproportionately alter the competition or the fairness of the competition for regional students from perhaps UNLV to work at these types of firms?
Well, people like to say fairness a lot. People want things to be fair. Well, the fact of the matter is that you do need people that are quite innovative, but there's only so many people that you can import. You can import 1 or 2 people from MIT or Stanford or whatnot, but they still have to employ local talent. And that's one of the things, is that there is local talent here in Las Vegas. There are people that know how to program computers. There are people that can run these businesses that they might not necessarily have the opportunity for because there aren't jobs available here. So let's say they have a computer science degree, but they can't get employed with that in Las Vegas. And so they get another job. Because we can help bring in more tech sector here. We can help create an agglomeration, which agglomerations of technology fields like Silicon Valley, like Detroit with car manufacturing, improve the overall performance of that sector of the economy in the specific city.
Okay. Andrea, you're bilingual, at least. What is your take on the contemporary Las Vegas landscape, including downtown and other facets like education?
Well, for education, I know that I can speak on my personal behalf. When I moved here to this country, at least in the middle school that I was placed in, I was in 2 ESL classes that were very similar and back to back, and there weren't enough resources. The teacher was just saying about the book and repeating the vocabulary. So I think that, we have such a big population that is not, English is not the first language, that does need to be a focus that is going to help us have a better education system. If those people can speak the language, then we have a better chance at becoming better for a better, district with better education. And I think that, Tony Shea has been very instrumental in putting Vegas on the map, that we're not just Sin City and let's go party, And so if we're on the map that we also care about technology, we can get the funding or the help to become, better in the areas that need to be addressed.
All right. Very interesting, compelling points made here today. But that's all the time we have for today. Share your opinions and any ideas or topics you would like us to scramble about to thescramble.unlv@gmail.com. You can also catch full episodes of The Scramble at unlv.tv. For all of us here at The Scramble, thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.